about how we want to proceed with the document and notifying city council of what they would like to see us do. And then number two, about the surveying the staff members. I hope too that y'all have had a chance to look at those proposed questions and have given some feedback so that we can look at those tonight too. So tonight we're time on the questions, but I'll give Elise and Jack a few minutes to give us an update on where they think we are on the report, which is fabulous, by the way. Thank you.
Thanks. I just quickly, before we got into the meeting, went through and kind of made a list of like what are the things that are left to do when it comes to finalizing our document. Some and minor kind of things to do. As far as minor things are concerned, we still have some links that we need to go in and actually link. Sometimes that requires creating like a nice clean document from like our raw material, our raw data. We have table and figure numbers to do, which is kind of one of the last things after, you know, you might insert another table up here and then you got it down. So that's kind of a last minute thing. I have one follow-up question with Ted. He's not here, so I'll say several what I call like bigger items that we still need to handle, including at the top of the document, we have a background section that sort of describes the history of this group and the whole purpose behind creating the survey. And you might recall that before we were the realignment working group, we were the restructure working group. And so there was whether or not that part of the history of this group needs to be summarized and put into that opening paragraph, just to have a more comprehensive history of our group. So where I had left that was that my brain is running dry on creative juices as far as how to incorporate that in there. But if someone else wants to come up with some text, I'm very happy to edit and bring things together. But that's something that we're missing. Also, Jack made some comments on some tables on page 16 that have the themes that they imply are very similar to some themes that come up later in the open-ended comments section. And so we want to add just a few sentences there, kind of looping all that together. There is some more work that needs to be done in the equity and inclusion section when it comes to talking about the racial demographics and just kind of putting those in perspective with the with Asheville census, racial census data, just to give a reference, as well as how we want to talk about the ages. There was some discussion about adjusting that graph on the age distribution, because we only had 60 people out of 145 survey, only 60 to 70 people actually completed the demographics section. So we have over half of our participants didn't actually provide that. And that kind of, you know, you want to take that into consideration. But if you plot, 100 people didn't answer next to 10 people said they were between this age and this age, well, now you've got this big column like dwarfing the whole rest of your graph.
Right.
So we just have some like nuanced things there. I would, you know, in this group, we've talked about accessibility, public accessibility and accommodations. And so something that I think would be good for us to take time to do is to go through the graphs and images and actually add alternative text, so that if someone is reading it with a screen reader, I believe what happens is then here's a blank hole where a picture would be.
I know nothing about that. Do we have anyone with that expertise?
I have a little bit of familiarity with it. I don't know all of the specifics, but I think it's generally in line with what Elise described. We just have to write a narrative statement that describes what is in each
Oh,
picture
I
and
see.
graph in text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you right click on an image in the document, there's a thing in the contextual menu that says like alt text, but it does, yeah, and I've tried to add some of it, but I'm sure someone with a little bit more experience or expertise might write a better descriptive paragraph. So that's something it's not necessary, but I feel like it would be good if we did try to devote some energy to that.
I
And
think that's a great idea. There are all kinds of reasons why someone might want to use alt text to understand something, even if it's just a caption. I mean, even if it just repeats the information.
Mhm.
Let me ask Ben if there's somebody on the city staff that does that.
I don't think it needs to have, honestly, I don't think we need to go to expertise. It just has to be a clear description of what the visual is. That's it. A couple of
Okay.
sentences.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did try. I'm gonna I don't have to read. I tried on, when you've got a big chart that's showing the the positivity ranking of each of the boards, and you've got 20 boards. It's like, well, do you go and you say the first one in the list is the Civic Center Commission and they got 91% positivity, and the second, all the way down the list, or what's appropriate. And that's kind of where, like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, one thing you can do is embed a link that opens just a straight up, spreadsheet document or something like that, so that they can read it that way, so that there's a text.
But if they can't see it, they can't read it.
Well, text readers can read those things. That's why you do the alt text, so that the text reader can read the alt text.
Oh, so you're saying that, okay.
Well, and Google has a thing embedded in it where for any picture you can add a title and description, and it says, if people are accessing it for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be
let's
super we don't have to make it super complicated. It might be nice to have someone with a little bit more of that to just give a little guidance, but just something that's on the list.
Well, let's see what the city does, and we'll go from there.
And then the last thing that's been talked about is whether or not, so far we do not have recommendations in this document, but we've left places where we would put recommendations. Ted felt that in this document, maybe we shouldn't do recommendations yet, and this should just be the data, and then there'll be a separate document with recommendations to come next. So yeah, that's just that completes my list of big picture things to consider, unless Jack has anything else he'd like to add.
Yeah, actually a list of things before the last meeting, which I could not attend. I don't know if people still have copies of that, but in it I suggested, even if we don't have, quote, recommendations that we want to put forth, I think there are some things that we can suggest occur even without, quote, recommendations, or, for example, things that are actually occurring as we speak. I know that now there is a website now for new board and commission members where they can go and get themselves up to speed. So that sort of training and guidance and onboarding is being addressed. So I think that's one of the things I suggested, is that there be more say some things about, we could say some things about that, about suggestions that we believe leadership training and guidance should occur, that mission clarity be addressed, for every board that exists.
Mhm.
That there perhaps be more structured collaboration among the boards. Outreach for greater diversity of involvement, and maybe just some other things that need attention. And I
Mhm.
thought we could brainstorm about some of those other things, but it would seem to me that some sort of either a cover letter or a section on some things that we believe make sense are structured.
Okay. Alan had a comment.
He attended that presentation, I think, with Jack, and I don't know who else was there with on the dashboard. And for new members, that the city was put online a couple. What was that, Jack? Week and a half ago or so, roughly. I don't hear you. Anyways, one of the areas that I think needs to be better addressed by the city is boards are recruited, and I think they needed to make more of an effort in that area. We talked about that in the past. There's a variety of vehicles that they could use, such as the urban news and the urban FM radio station in town, reaching out to Black pastors in the community, to the predominantly Black neighborhood associations. But I don't see the city doing that yet. And I think now that they're recruiting quarterly, I think they need to make a stronger effort in that direction. So that's, and then the other is, I looked at the draft survey, at least real quick, the report. And are you planning on preparing an executive summary as an intro to the survey, maybe a 3 or 4 page summary of the main
Yeah,
issues?
I think the plan, once we're all good on the content of our document, whether it's going to have
Okay.
the recommendations or not, then
Okay.
to synopsis.
And that can go in as a preface with Roman numerals instead of having to renumber everything.
Yes, yeah. When we also have space in the document for like a key takeaways also, where we could do a summary kind of like that, a more bulleted list.
Yeah, and I did mention in prior meetings that maybe within that executive summary, if you're going to just highlight some key points, either indicate the pages that they occur in the report itself, or link them somehow. But the easiest thing was just to indicate the pages that those findings are located, so they can, if somebody wants to deep dive into more detail, it's available.
Yeah, we'll get into that when we get into the getting ready to far more publishing aspect of the whole document. Patrick, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Elise, you noted a few items, minor items that I assume some of the things you mentioned, like drafting a background section. It sounds like you're looking for some help from other members of the group on that. Is that correct?
Well, that's why I was hoping. That's why I was hoping to be able for people to comment, and I'll be happy to fill in on the background section, Elise.
Yeah, and all of those places that I just talked about here, they're all marked with comments and other discussions that are going on in those margins there. So if you're looking into that report, you should be able to easily see where that kind of stuff is.
Okay, and just one minor question. You wanted permission from about a city photo. I have hundreds of city photos. What kind of an image were you looking for?
Oh, I don't know. And that's like, so, one of the last things we can consider.
I know, but
a document, it's got some generic city photo, and I'm like, let's put a real picture of Asheville instead of some stock.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I've got plenty of those. Okay, that's good.
And,
So it
and
wasn't,
Elise, would you like me to like make a post to the Google group after the meeting, just restating those needs, just so anyone that wasn't here today knows how to help?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm a real bullet point, check the boxes kind of person. So if a nice list like that helps other people, that certainly, yeah.
Okay,
good.
I will do that.
And I think too, again, the synopsis, hopefully would be, I think, a synopsis plus key takeaways. I think the two should always be linked together, and that it should be a standalone documented. I think we talked about that at the last meeting anyway, but I think we're all on the same page on that. Anything else about the report that you want the whole group to know about at this stage? I know you're sick of looking at it.
If I can comment, I think
Sure, Jack.
I know there's been question as to whether we should wait until after we do these follow-up, any follow-up work with city staff before publishing this report. And I would suggest that we not wait. Sometime since this was initiated, I think it would be in everyone's best interest, including our own, to publish what we can as soon as we can, even if in that publishing we suggest that there is follow-up work that will be done. So that's just my 2 cents worth. I think the longer we wait, the less impact this is going to have.
How do y'all
Jack,
feel on that?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding your comment, Jack. Are you saying that we should publish this report before we do a survey with city staff, or are you saying we should wait to meet with city staff before we publish anything?
We should publish before city staff.
Okay.
Alan, what do you think?
I'm in agreement with that. I think we're into June already, and I'm really concerned that, as Jack said, that we could possibly lose the impact of this great report. It should have some impact with the city, and I think if we can get it done within the next couple of weeks and get something out to the city, highly valuable.
Okay, Elise, how do you think how do you feel about that first?
I don't disagree with that. Yeah, I think we should get it out, including some comments that, there are staff surveys forthcoming that will provide additional information.
Okay. All right.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
Okay.
I mean, we're pretty close. If some other folks of it, the text, for editing, then it should go pretty quickly, because then everything else from that just kind of comes from what's already written and just gets distilled down further.
Okay. What about the rest of y'all? Are you, Dee, Nina, are y'all willing to do some writing or do some editing, do some proofreading?
I'm happy editorial stuff. Right now, producing text de novo is going to be tricky for me.
Okay, and Dee, are you gonna have? Well, do you have time in the next couple of weeks?
And I was just going to say, I think the report should go forward rather than wait on the staff's input, because you're going to lose too.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think on the diversity piece, that's probably one. The other thing too is maybe some techniques that could be used to, besides what is being done by the city. I know that they're using the Reparations Commission members to send out these notices of trying to diversify with, and I don't know if that's really a turn rate has been on that. I do know that she's sending them out like every 2 weeks. So I'm happy to work on that and also counsel with some folks on the reparations committee. And I do represent about 70 Black churches throughout the region. So happy to work with that and to provide some information. And I'll do whatever else I can help with, with the time that I have between traveling and stuff. So whatever I can do to help, I will.
Okay. Well, that the diversity aspect of it would be great since we're not. Um, let's see. Are you saying that they're asking the members of the reparations committee, new members and stuff like that through their own
She's
network?
sending it out. She's sending it out to all of us on the whole listserv to talk about diversity. So I'm just surmising, that's what that is. So,
Can anybody sign up to be on that listserv? Or is it
as
just
far as I mean,
members?
public information, sure.
Oh yeah, duh. No duh. Okay. All righty. Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Anything else about the report, or we can get on to the discussion of the questions for staff? Okay. Patrick. Okay.
How's that? Is this legible to everyone?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Um, so here's my first question. How I would assume that I am making an assumption that there are probably 10 staff people who are involved in being liaisons. That total number. Are we going to try to survey all of the staff people who are liaisons? Did we make a decision on that? I mean, if it's 10, I say yes. Because it's
I
not
don't,
that many.
yeah, I think if it's a repeatable survey, we might as well send it out to everyone who's eligible to answer it.
Mm-hmm. Then, if that's the case, so Leslie and I are on a committee, the Urban Trail, of how Stephanie or Dana would answer those questions. I will know exactly who it is who's answering those questions because of the type of structure we have or whatever. So, how are we going to maintain the anonymity of these staff people from their boss's perspective and from the public's perspective of maintaining the anonymity of their identity? And some Elise, yes, ma'am.
I feel like, well, are we talking about the official liaisons? Or are we talking about all those extra people that also show up at every more than 10 if we talk about like all those extra people?
Right. I'm going to ask Ben about that and see. And it could be that it may be a mixture depending on the actual committees, like for instance, I mean, well, it's interesting just with the urban trail because we're installing stuff outside in the public domain. There'll be that you could have the roads crew, you could have the landscape people, you could have the sidewalk people, you'll have the public art people, you'll have the artist, and you'll have the manufacturer. I mean, there are all kinds of people other than the folks that are on that committee, but there are staff or vendors, that are so, you know, depending on where you are sometimes in your staff work, you could need all of those people for a extended period of time. Patrick, what do you think?
Yeah, I personally think that it would be great if we could get input from as many members of staff that interact with the boards and commissions process as possible. And I think our first two questions here do ask, which boards do you staff provide services? So that would allow us pretty easily to figure out which folks are, in a liaison role and which ones kind of come in as staff support from their specific department.
What do you have to say, Dee?
I was just going to ask, does this also include the city attorney? Because I know that the city and the county attorney attend all of the reparations there. And then they attend the subcommittee meetings as well, all of them. So I was just wondering if it was going to be them too.
What's their purpose in it?
You see,
Not just
you're talking about lawsuit mitigation, possible areas, and it has always been the threat of litigation against reparations from the get-go hearings. So that commission, even the commissions are, you're given advice from the either lawyer or both, from the city attorney and or the county as to what is legal, not legal, public purposes for such things. But they attend not only those working groups besides the main body. So I'm just wondering, and then the city attorney, I do know, attends quite a few other meetings. So I'm just wondering if it'll be the legal department as well. Thanks.
Hey, well, I'll check with Ben on that too. Jack, you had a comment?
Yeah, all of the earlier comments are adding to my confusion, as it were. I made a comment which is off to the right, which actually speaks to, from my position as an outsider. I don't serve, so I'm not really familiar. I don't go to council or board meetings, and I've listened in on a few, but what's not clear to me is what this staff liaison role include. It sounds like from what Dee is saying that there are not only city staff that are and maybe provide logistics and that kind of support, but it sounds like there's also any other member of the any capacity. Would we consider for just people sitting in on the meeting? I'm confused as to what the role of these liaison people are, and how far we should take the survey.
Hold on a minute, Elise. Let me see if I can explain. The Reparations Commission is an anomaly. because they have a tremendous number of subcommittees that hit almost every aspect of government that we have. You know, they've got one on housing, one on, reparations repayment, actually, and just all these different aspects of it. So it does hit quite a being there to they do provide logistic help, but in instances, number two, they're also there for expertise. And number three, if I'm not mistaken, as Dee was just explaining, to make sure that the public doesn't go into a direction that is potentially libelous or illegal, or something that just keeps them on the straight and narrow. The other committees are more tightly bound in their charge. So if you're on affordable housing, you may need to meet with so you're going to meet with planning, but you may need if you want to talk about how to rezone a piece of property. You may have to talk to economic development people to come in and talk to you about how to finance a project, or what other opportunities are for the money. You may one staff person, if maybe sometimes two for these bigger committees, where that is part of their job to be there at each of those meetings and to provide assistance, professional assistance, and some logistics. And sometimes they're the ones who are manufacturing the minutes and sometimes not. So it's not straight across the board. Every liaison acts in the same
Yeah.
manner.
My first reaction to that is that we might want to consider limiting our survey of these people to those for whom it's specifically part of their job to liaise with these committees, rather than those who are going in for a specific purpose, to advise or address a specific issue, but they're not there frequently. So, I don't know, I guess I'm still confused.
To
Elise,
that point, if you go to the boards and commissions, the landing page for the Asheville boards and commissions, that it has a link to every board and, their meeting schedule. It also lists a staff member contact for each one of those boards. And I believe those are the people that we're referring to when we're talking about the staff liaison, the official person who's recognized to coordinate that meeting, basically. And I took that list. I did some magic in Excel to try to make sure, are people who do that. There is one person, Brenda Mills, who staffs both the African American Heritage Commission and the Reparations Commission. But when I boil it down, there's 19 official staff liaisons, about 20 boards that we're specifically talking about, the advisory board. So it's about a 1-for-1.
okay. So now that we know that number is double what we were thinking, I still think we should try to survey all of them. It's still a workable number, don't you think? If we keep these questions down to a minimum. Nina, what do you have to say?
I think it would be helpful if we've identified 24 liaison folks. It'd be helpful to have them provide a few sentences of narrative about the other staff people who sometimes accompany them in doing liaison work. just to get a feel, not with the aim of surveying all those other people, but with an aim of getting kind of a body count and a you know, who those other people are, how frequently they attend, and what their role is like. And you could even ask a subjective question of the staff liaisons. Do you get the sense that their participation is effective? Do you feel that their input is valuable, etc.? Just to have a way of registering that sort of cloud, the peripheral cloud of folks who but don't have an ongoing liaison role.
Okay. All right, I've got that down. Well, what do you think of these questions? Thinking of those 20 boards and 19 people, what do you think of these questions so far? How many do we have total, Patrick?
Let's see. I've got it on another tab, but we have right.
If we could get it down to 10, I think, I don't know, that's an arbitrary number, but still. Let's see.
And see if there's any we need, but we could probably come. It's in line and off to the right.
Okay.
Noticing as I'm going, I feel like it is a pretty short number of questions, like a dozen questions, but what I'm noticing is every question has like 5 sub questions. So I just want to really focus on consolidating our questions as tightly as possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was noticing that too. So those first 3, except for A, are kind of, well, actually, is it possible to pre-populate some of these questions? So you're sending it to Brenda Mills and you want her to talk about the Reparations Commission, and we don't know how long. Well, she's been on for and the others not so much. So some of these are just your basic 1, 2, and 3, your basic. 1A goes back to how often do they have to get other staff members involved? Let's keep moving. What about questions are necessary? Do y'all agree with that? Okay. Let's move up some, Patrick. Number 4. As you can see, I like leaving out that perceive this board function. Just comment on how what you see is doing well and how you might be improvement or hindrances. I think that asking for their perspective on the board's functioning may be a little bit too much in the face of the other of the volunteers' perspective and on their work. It might be a little bit too pointing a finger at them. What do y'all think on that? Dee and Nina? Dee, why don't you go first, then Nina?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Question, was the Reparations Commission surveyed? Because I don't remember, it's not that, because I wasn't, if they were surveyed, or do they figure into the survey process at all? It is short-lived, board and commission, although it's very intensive right now. It will sunset next year. And the second question was, is the role of these boards and commissions advise and consent specifically, or are they charged differently? Are all of them? Because you're talking about actionable recommendations. And that's the reason for the question. Those are my questions. Thanks.
I think, did we get feedback from reparations, Elise?
In the member survey that we've already
Uh-huh.
did?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we did. Okay, so they were surveyed. And then I think as far as what their purpose is, I think
When were they surveyed? Do you know when that was?
it's when the main survey went out.
Went out around the holiday time last year. It was like between Thanksgiving and Christmas into January.
Okay. I wasn't, I didn't fill one out, but anyway, that's no problem. Thanks.
And I think with regard to what their charge is, it's important with regard to whether they are functioning well or not. It's just, are they doing the work that they were supposed to do, that they were set out to do? And maybe in part of this, it would come out that the work they're meant to do isn't being done, or it's no longer needed, or something along those lines. I don't know. I think that's part of what boards do need to be eliminated, which I know that some their members don't want to hear that. But if they're not putting forth, if they're not making any changes to the community for the better, then what is the purpose other than if there's oversight needed on some function of city council, city work? I don't know. What do y'all think, Nina? And then Alan. Nina,
I lost track of what it was I wanted to say, so carry on.
Alan, what about you?
Yeah, my take on the fourth question is, and maybe a better way of stating this, do you think that the work of the board and commission is consistent with its mission or charge? And, and if they don't agree that it's interesting that to do some kind of follow-up on, why is there a disagreement between the chair and that board and what the perception is of the staff member?
Well, there might not be a disagreement.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, if they suggest that there is a difference between how they perceive the mission and charge of the board versus what the board is actually doing, it's that's interesting if they're going off in a different direction.
And Alan, I would just note that the 12th question, you can't see it on the document now, but it does speak specifically about alignment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
with
forgot.
the
Maybe I
mission,
should
so I
look
think
down.
it might be
Yeah.
covered
Okay.
there.
You're right. Thank you, Patrick.
Jack?
And maybe we
Yeah,
don't
I
need.
think this question, I think we need to, we're kind of getting in the weeds here. I think rather than asking anything about, for them to make judgments about how the board functions, I would go along with the comment that Elise added, which is just ask them about the strengths. What are the strengths of this, of that you see in this board, and what are obstacles to its efficacy,
Mm-hmm,
and leave it at that.
mm-hmm,
Because the way it's worded otherwise is, I think in our past survey, there was a suggestion that we were getting a little too us versus them. This is asking the staff member to make a judgment on whether the board functions well or not. I think it's just, what are the strengths and weaknesses
mm-hmm.
of this board, of the efficient effectiveness of the.
Right. Patrick, were there other questions about the board itself that we could pull up up here to see, and so we could discuss those at the same time? Because we take a shift on question number 5.
I think so. The one I was referring to is that board's missions and goals.
Yeah,
I
move
can
that
move
up,
that
please.
up. I'm not going to renumber it now, but I'll move it up.
No, no, no. Mm-mm.
Should that go before or after number 4?
Immaterial at this stage of the game.
Okay.
Do we need number 4 if we have 5?
I personally think that number 4 has something separate.
I do too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if we'd like, we don't necessarily have to write the language here, but I could just write a note that I think we'd like to reword this one, essentially at the least suggested here.
I agree. Nina, what did you have to say?
Well, it seems to me two important distinctions with what we're asking staff to comment on here. The first is on their experience of participating in the boards, how it impacts their job, whether they have the resources they need to do what needs doing on behalf of the board. So there's a cluster of questions means to serve as a liaison and how that's working both for them individually and for the purposes of the board. And then there are these questions that are, as Jack said, kind of passing judgment on whether the board is healthy, whether it is living up to its mission, whether it is, whether there's trouble in, Dodge City. I can imagine that those things would be things that staff might be more hesitant in being candid about, especially made it likely that they would be more identifiable as. So I would certainly start out talking mostly about the staff's role impacts their workflow and their career path, and whether they feel they have what they need to do that job well. And then about what are the strengths and weaknesses and so forth, because I think that's going to be trickier for them to answer in a way that they're going to be comfortable answering.
Okay. Elise?
So just what I'm hearing from you, Nina, I want to try to understand. You feel like we should start with the more like list the facts kind of questions and get to the more opinion kind of stuff later, because you feel like we'll sort of like be softening them up a little along the way.
Yeah, I think it's about being clear about how they perceive their role, how they perceive how working as a staff liaison impacts their other duties. Do they get the kind of feedback that they need in order to by their own lights to do the job well? Those sort of things, so that one of the big questions that's come up over and over again is this whole thing too burdensome on staff? Are they overworked? Are they not recognized for their efforts? Are they, do they find any of it rewarding, or is it just a big pain in the butt? I mean, those things, as Dee said, those things are the kind of things that can be actionable. If
Mhm.
there's real dissatisfaction around those things, that's something that can be addressed by city management and by the expectations that board and commission members have about
Right.
what staff is going to do for them.
Mm-hmm.
But the more subjective stuff, is this board working well? What would I recommend that be structured different? Those are big judgment questions. And I think it's very worthwhile getting their perspective because they spend an awful lot of time with these folks. But I would ask that later. um, and and surround it with reassurances that, and I would ask city staff to ensure that this is the case, that that candor is not going to have any negative repercussions for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, all right, so let's see.
If,
Let's go
if
down. Go
If
ahead.
the group, yeah, if the group feels reordering them, that would make sense. I can make a note of that. I don't want to reorder them while we're working through it, but that
No,
wouldn't be hard to do.
right. That's good. So we're down to number 6.
This seemed a little contentious, this question. I feel like this might require some.
But this is really the whole gist of the whole process. Um,
Yeah, and I do want to note on this one, I can show the comment and then slide back, but I just wanted to indicate that Jay Hill, who's attended a few of our meetings, suggested that we ask for quantification here, maybe a Likert scale. And I think Elise also noted that too much of your time might be not the most effective way to present this question.
I
exactly.
very much agree about that.
Yeah, I think that it's yeah, so
Again, I would start with the concrete. How many hours do you spend? Is this
Right.
in line with expectation from management? So that the baseline is established. This is what is expected of me. This is how much it actually takes. And you can then ask them to comment on, is that too much? But I think we can draw deductions from, I'm expected to do this much, but it actually takes me 3 times as much. That would be a clue that there's a challenge happening.
mhm. Um
It sounds to me that there's some agreement around turning this into a scale, perhaps,
Mhm.
and perhaps coming up with a list here of objective questions. I do like the idea of asking how many hours a week or things like that.
yeah, something that's a little more concrete and it's it's the truth. It's life, it's the fact.
Easy to quantify.
Right. It's a
Yeah.
quantify. Right, exactly.
So ask question, has is the burden pretty even, or some months it's twice as much? You could ask, is this a steady rate of hours, or does it cause jam ups where you have to spend disproportionate amount of time occasionally?
mm, okay, let's go down to the next one and see where we are with that.
Okay.
Number 7. Oh wait, what is this? Hold on.
This is additional comments on the above. These are. So I'd wonder, does anyone want to comment that any of these proposed sub questions they feel are particularly important?
Well, I think knowing if they have the appropriate training to do what they've been asked to do. I think that we've all been in situations where the staff person in some of these more contentious boards, commissions, committees have not known how to handle um, what's it, um, the disruptors in the meeting. For instance, Cecil Bothwell just dropped that bomb, the first public comment at first meeting, and that shifted the entire meeting, and no one else eager to follow that statement. He changed the entire uh, culture of that meeting, and I think that that's partly why it killed her from the very beginning of this whole process, and nobody stopped him on that. He took, I think it was, he spoke for 15 minutes straight, and nobody stopped it. Nobody said, okay, we didn't set any ground rules. We didn't say everybody can talk for 4 minutes or something. Don't hog the microphone, whatever. Don't pull it away from somebody else or, whatever. And so, since there were no ground rules, which should have been established from the very beginning, he took it away and he blasted it. And other people in the room might not have felt that way, but after such a I don't know, boisterous beginning, they might have felt. And
So
so
Stacy, do you feel this highlighted question here gets to that concept for you?
for me, it does. At least it's the question I keep asking all of our staff liaisons that we know about, our council members, our staff, the management staff at the city. I'm asking them constantly, is part of the reason why staff feel so uncomfortable or it takes them, so they feel like it takes an inordinate amount of their time, et cetera, et cetera. Is it because they don't know what they're doing through no fault of trained in group facilitation, so they don't know how to get the group moving in the right direction to where they need to go to fulfill whatever it is they're supposed to be doing? And number three, they might not have the knowledge necessary to help that particular board or commission move forward because it's not the right staff person. And I think this is part of what has caused this unease of the staff members of working on these boards and commissions, is that they don't feel comfortable doing it. And the reason they don't feel comfortable is because they don't know what they're doing. And that just because you went to school to learn how to be a planning director doesn't mean you went to school and learned how to do group facilitation. So that's just my thought on that. Elise.
I would support a question asking if they felt like they were, trained enough in those areas. I think we could ask that without using the phrases like, when tempers run high or members aren't meeting expectations. I feel like those are kind of like setting a stage thing. I think that is a valuable question, but I think it can be asked in a more neutral way.
Right. And partly I just put that in just to kind of give a reference for why I was feeling that there are reasons that you get training for this sort of stuff. Alan?
The issue with Cecil Bothwell, I think that's more of a chairs issue than staff, but I agree that there's been a number of new staff members added to the city payroll, and some of them may not have the technical skills to support a particular board or commission, such as planning and zoning or UFC would be another good example where you really have to be have quite a deep knowledge of the UDO to address a lot of the issues on the UFC. So I would rather have the question address those kinds of issues. Do you have the technical skills? You feel comfortable with your technical skills, let's say, to support that board or commission, not whether you have it or not, but do you feel comfortable? Do it in a
Okay.
way that it's not negative and, you know, it's reflecting on the individual.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, well, and those are really two different issues. You have two things you're trying to do in a meeting. You're trying to keep everybody engaged and move forward and complete your charge and make sure that all of the people are engaged, they feel valued, and their voice is heard. And those are, you know, two different types of objectives that you have for a meeting or for a group.
Yeah, and I think that falls, a lot of that falls upon the chair of the board or commission.
Right. Well, you know, with our first meeting, we had no chair. We just had a
Correct. That was different.
trained,
A little different.
trained group facilitator. So, but I think a lot of times too, again, this goes back to what we've been saying too, is the level of skill of the chairperson. If you get someone who's more has more experience in this sort of thing, then they're going to be better at it than someone who's not. Okay, so we kind of have an idea of where we want to go with that. Nina?
Want to just, for my own understanding, kind of refocus this to understand what sort of answers, what sort of responses are we looking for from staff that will actually be helpful for us in making recommendations, and to whom will we be making those recommendations? Will we be making them to city management? Will we be making them to council? Will we be making them to the boards? Because I think that there are several different audiences here, and it feels to me like what we have here is a bunch of a kind of cluster of survey questions are large enough that they might give us information that would serve each of those groups. But I feel like we need to have focused questions that ask one very specific thing at a time, that we can then more effectively analyze and get the outcome to the folks who are going to be able to do something about it.
Okay, so give us some suggestions then if you don't think we're still playing with these questions. We haven't gotten it down to what the survey is. So give us some examples of what you think, how you think these need to be worded.
Well, for example, there are a bunch of questions about the impact of serving on a board on staff. Do they have the right training? Do they have the right help from other city staff? Is their contribution useful to the board? Are they being evaluated appropriately for their work? Those are all from the perspective of the staff person, and how being a liaison impacts them and their effectiveness in their job. And I think we can ask a bunch of those questions that have a range of responses and then ask for comment, the way we did with the other survey, so that we have a set of responses that we can then take. Here's how staff experiences being liaison on a board. You know, what they choose to do about that is, of course, then on them, right? But also we could report this to city council, you know, just FYI, this is how this structure is working for staff at the moment. And then we have those questions that are evaluations of the goals of the board. To me, we should be, again, focusing and stepping through that. You know, are you clear on the mission of this board? Do you have an established line of communication with board members? You know, queries from the board, how do you handle them? Have you observed, you know, specific kinds of challenges or needs that haven't been fulfilled? And just be really, I agree with the idea of having it be neutral, so that the information that flows out of it is something we can deduce from the responses where there is dysfunction without actually requiring them to call it out specifically.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to work toward. We've got our ideas down here, and, we're going to hopefully massage these questions and get them down to something that staff would feel comfortable answering, and that would give us an indication of just where they feel some of those very specific questions that you were asking. I thought we had here in our thoughts, but and I do think that what we're saying here is that we want to try to be very objective in how they respond so they feel comfortable in responding. Is that, do y'all agree with that that's what we're trying to move toward? This is our first pass with questions, so we haven't had a whole lot of massaging done on them. So I think we'll try to keep that in mind as we all move forward on this. So number 7, taking in consideration, okay, that's what I was confused. Were we talking about our boards and commissions, or were we talking about their board and commission? I don't know who wrote this question, so I need a little help or clarification.
It could have been Ted. And I will just note on this one, this is one where we also had feedback from Jay about using a Likert scale here as well. So I just wanted to propose that if people felt that maybe this could be rolled into a series of questions in that format above, that might be an effective way to address this one.
Okay, that sounds good. Elise?
Are we talking about question 7 right now? Number
You
7?
can talk about anything you want to talk about with them.
I don't like number 7. I don't understand why we're asking this. I feel like it's just asking people to say, do you like doing this or not? And we're not going to get anything valuable out of this.
Okay.
I'm happy for someone to tell me wrong right now. That's just my reaction to that question.
Alan, what do you think?
I agree with Elise, and I don't think it's up to staff to make that kind of decision anyways. That's a board decision, not staff. They can think whatever they want, but has every right to make whatever recommendations it chooses to make.
Mhm.
I don't know if the staff should be weighing in on that.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
I'm inclined to agree
ask,
with that.
does anyone feel strongly that we need to keep this question? If not, I think we could note this could be one that could be removed.
I agree.
Elise, you look like you're still uncertain.
Oh no, I'm just still contemplating asking people to make a value judgment on something just feels weird.
Mm-hmm. Um, and don't you think that number 8 kind of falls into that same thing? To make actionable. See, this is where I think,
Yes.
that you've got this situation where staff should be helping the board to make good recommendations to the board. So if they're saying, does does the does this board make actionable recommend again, I think that it's the responsibility of the staff member to get them into that job. I mean, that's really part of what I think they're supposed to do. If they're not doing anything that requires recommendations, then why do we have that particular board? I don't, that's my thought. Um, and I'm focusing on this word actionable. Is it simply, are they making recommendations or are they not? And evaluated and implemented. Well, that gets back to the city council. I don't know if we want to go there.
I agree that asking staff to assess this is not necessarily helpful.
Um, it, Jack, what do you think?
I think this falls into the same category as question 7. I think it's unnecessary and it's the answers are not going to be useful.
Okay. Dee, what about you, ma'am?
Thank you. I agree. You're putting the onus. I don't know if anybody on staff in their right mind would put themselves in the line of fire from council, because council is, I mean, they're the only ones that are going to take any action anyway. And I
Right.
don't know if they'll even answer it. I see that this was the onus goes back to staff again on several of these. I know we're on this question, but you're talking about what interactions has it had with city council? All of these things, how has council boards, and you're asking some pretty highly political questions here. And I don't know if I was on staff of the city, if I'd even answer those questions. I mean, it's getting close. Thank you.
Patrick, why don't you make a notation of 8, 9, and 10 that we need to see if there's a more if we really need to know this information, is there something that's more objective and doesn't put the onus on a staff person to
Yes.
you know?
It applies to 11 too.
Right. Oh, okay. That's 11.
Yeah, does this apply to, I'll just put this comment for all of these in a group, but we're saying 8, 9.
And 11. And 11, maybe.
For sure. Yeah, that's
It's also, excuse me, my reference also was question 11.
Okay.
That's kind of loaded. That's real.
Okay.
I would like somehow for us to be able to ask about the communication, how the communication is flowing between board and city council in both directions. How to do that in a neutral way.
But is that something that staff determines? I mean,
No. I mean,
I don't think they should, but I think they have keen insights on how what that communication looks like.
They also may be able to facilitate that communication.
Right. That's the kind of direction I was going to think we should go,
but isn't this a staff management function to take the results and forward them on to council, I don't think that liaison are the people who's either responsible or have a say in how that communication takes place. That's a city manager or assistant manager function.
Um, I've seen it. I've seen it go both ways, and it really depends on and with if it's a highly toxic, highly volatile kind of statement, then a lot of times you go volunteer to volunteer. So your volunteer board member goes to your volunteer, quote unquote, city council member and talks to them and says, we need your support. You know, if it's a bit more standard and needs some kind of help needs staff help to move forward or more staff involvement to move something forward, then staff member will go to their boss and say, you know, this is what this board wants to do, and we need more staff help in getting it done. Can you say, okay, we can give you some more staff time. You or somebody else can help with that. And that's how I've always been told that if it's political, if it's toxic, if it's, you know, a volunteer to volunteer. And so that would be the chairperson or the board members to your city council. And sometimes you talk to them one-on-one, and then you make your presentation when you know you've got your straw votes. Or, you know, that's just what I've been taught. Elise, you have some comments?
As all this conversation is happening, kind of what I'm synthesizing clear, at least among this group of 7 or 8 people here, it's unclear really what the role of the staff liaisons are, where the boundaries are, what the expectations are. And so I would assume then that maybe a lot of the rest of the public, a lot of the rest of the board members also are unsure. And so perhaps as we start thinking about recommendations, something that we might consider recommending is a clarification in the role of.
Oh, you froze up.
While we wait for Elise to reconnect, I'll just say I do think that that's a good suggestion. I think that's something we've just identified in a common issue for boards and of course members of the public.
Mhm. So Patrick, make a notation to maybe a Likert scale, if we could figure out a Likert scale to figure out how the staff liaison views their role. Well, what you could do, ask them, how do they view their role, and has that played out? You know, you expected your role. How did you view your role to be, and give them 5 choices, and then say, you know, is that bearing out? Is that how you are? Or I don't
Meeting
know.
your expectations?
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, something like that. Because I do think in my own experience, it has been very different. Both have been successful, but the staff role was very different, and it's partly because of the structure of those two different specific departments and turnover by staff in the two different departments. So all those things can have an effect on the staff liaisons functioning also, I think. Um, Elise, you froze up on us, so we didn't get to hear everything you had to say.
Basically, what I was just trying to say was that it seems like, maybe our like microcosm of the discussion is just representative of a larger problem in that the role of staff liaisons is unclear among advisory board members, among public, perhaps among staff and council too. I don't know, but just that there might be an opportunity to recommendation that that's clarified kind of across the board.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Is that the last question, Patrick? Number 12?
Well, yeah, that's the last one.
Okay, well,
I'll note this is another one where Jay has suggested that these are also yes, no responses. I don't know if this falls in the same bucket, but if we're going to have a series of questions there, these could be yes, no, or scale questions.
mm-hmm. Alan, do you have time? Are you up to maybe taking a stab at some of these questions and rewriting them in the manner that we're trying to get to?
This is a bad week for me because of what's going on with
Okay.
health right now. It just started out that way, so I'm going to be kind of unavailable.
Okay. Work on them a little bit and see what we come up with and have Alan review them maybe at the end of the week.
I'd be glad to do that. I'd be glad to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you want to do that? We'll go through this feedback. We'll create a revised list of questions and send it back out to the group. Trying to do that by the end of this week. Is that what you're thinking, Stacy?
Not the end of, I think it's going to be the end of next week.
Okay.
Do you want to have a kind of a Zoom among the three of us?
Yeah, let's try to do that.
Towards the end of next week?
Does
that make sense, Patrick, too?
Yeah, I would suggest if that works for me. Does I guess I'm wondering, I don't want to like exclude other members of the group of being able to weigh in. So if we have a draft ahead of time, I'd like to share that out and ask for feedback just so that we can, I know that, it can be helpful to process it efficiently if there's less people, but I don't want to exclude anybody.
I was thinking the three of us would get something together that the rest of the group could review. And I know a lot working on a report. So I don't want to burden them with this part of it. And, tomorrow we'll see what happens. And it could be that we're doing this all for naught. But anyway, so yeah, let's play around with this a little bit and then see where we stand.
Okay. So, I'll just share if anyone after this meeting wants to add any comments on the document, feel free. But when Stacey and Alan and I review to create the second draft, we'll be looking at what's on this document, the notes.
Absolutely.
Where I indicated our agreement today. And we'll use that to get us, I hope, closer to what can be turned into a survey.
Right. And feel free to make comments and put in your ideas for specific questions. Anything else for the good of the cause? Again, thank y'all very much for your continued support of the work that we're doing. And I think that it's going to be a great day when this is revealed to the staff and county and city council. Thank y'all very much. Take care
Thank
next
y'all.
week.
Thanks. Have a good one.